I was ordained in 1971 for the diocese, and only after I was ordained, as part of my spiritual reading, I began to read the life of St. Francis. And I remember before I even got halfway through the book, I was saying, this is what I want, this is what I seek, this is what I long to do. And I realized I had a Franciscan heart.
You didn't have to be in the 13th century to understand Francis. I could understand it even as a young boy in the second half of the 20th century, and as a much older man, I can continue to understand it and take meaning from it in the 21st century. So it's Francis that inspired me first. Then it's been the privilege, and it is a privilege to live with some of the best human beings God has ever created. Very simple, humble, dedicated, talented human beings who could be doing a lot of other things with their life, but they chose to be Franciscans, and it's their example each day that continues to inspire me.
My call in my experience has always come through scriptures. But scriptures, it's by paying attention. Sometime at your life, you hear something being read, and then that struck me. I was active in my church at St. Francis of Assisi on 31st Street. So I was helping in RCIA, and I was a lector and Eucharistic minister. And I was getting more joy in that part. And I was mostly looking toward the weekend just for these activities while I was dragging to go to work. And then one Sunday at church, when I was in the middle of that struggle, a scripture struck me again. And they were reading, and I remember it said, "You cannot serve God and mammon." And I was like, wow. And then so for me, it's like a light went off. So I say, oh, that's why I'm struggling too much. I think I have to find a way that's my line of work is in accord with my faith.
What first drew me to the Franciscans was being invited by my baptism. And I know that sounds kind of corny to say, but I think from the very beginning, I've always had something inside of me that's called me to God. And I was never sure if that was a call to religious life or the priesthood or what it was. But from my earliest days, I always remember just being invited and called by God in some way. And I went through many rocky years, a few dark nights of the soul, and I knew I needed God back in my life, but didn't really know how to go about doing it. And yeah, it was a period of time where I felt really broken and really unholy, and that I had made a lot of mistakes, burned a lot of bridges, hurt a lot of people, and was looking for a way to come back. And so I'm kind of church hopping around Manhattan where I was living at the time, and I went into St. Francis of Assisi Parish on 31st Street. And I thought, I pass by this building all the time, let me go in. And I walked in, and the opening hymn was "All Are Welcome." And I thought, okay, this is, all right. Yeah, so I kind of found a seat and sang the song. And then the friar, Father Jerome, gave this wonderful homily about how all are welcome at God's table. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, the mistakes you've made, the strengths you have, your weaknesses. God welcomes everybody. And I still remember, I just felt as if I just exhaled. And it was the first time in a long time I felt at home. And so that, combined with the invitation I got from my baptism and that sense of welcome, I began becoming more involved in my parish at 31st Street. Really became a lector, Eucharistic minister, one of the lay church leaders in a sense. And one day a friar came up to me and said, "Have you ever thought about becoming a friar?" And I said, I can't become a friar, and besides that, I'm way too old, And he said, "No, you're not." He said, "You're exactly what we're looking for. There's a discernment weekend coming up next weekend. Come and see what our life is like." I had nothing going on that weekend, and so I went up, and here I am now.
My life hasn't been one of major conversion, that I was one person and now I'm another. It's been the daily turning of my heart every day. How has God called me, and where do I find myself at the end of the day? And so one of the questions that's often asked is, how do you know that you're in the right place? And my answer is that I wake up every morning and I feel fulfilled. I feel that I'm in the right place. That doesn't mean that I'm happy all the time, but it means that I feel a sense of togetherness with these people. I feel a sense of accomplishment that I'm doing what God wants me to do. And so in that way, it's not one big thing or one thing I would say to people that, oh, if this happens, you'll know. My advice to people would be, just try it.
In my experience, the Holy Name Province and people dedicated to Franciscan life are challenged to embrace the leper wherever they are. I don't think there's one special place that does it better than another, but each one of our ministries deals with people on the periphery. We have people who live on the street that are easily identified as being on the margin. But we have people on our college campuses that I work with regularly, whether it's students, faculty, administrators, who in their own lives and their own issues, they feel very much on the periphery. We have people coming into our country and touching every one of the parishes we're in who are new to the experience of the United States. And unfortunately, in the culture we have, they're not always welcomed. And so we reach out in those ways. So the leper is the symbol of the leper, of someone on the periphery of the margins, is in every ministry we have.
Something that has really helped me to grow as a friar since I joined the province. It has been the opportunity, the privilege to serve the immigrant population in the United States, and in general, all those who are underserved in the church. I had been in several ministry sites. I had been serving in Manhattan, in New Jersey, in Delaware, and also in Maryland. In these many places, I had had the opportunity to be working with people who might be undocumented in this country, people with many needs, people who very often are voiceless. And it has been great to see how they continue to serve God and continue to bring the good news wherever they are in their own way, in their own circumstances. Their faith has strengthened my own faith.
I'd say I had two careers as a friar, and one has been, in the beginning, I was involved in education and in liturgy in schools and parishes. So I've taught from kindergarten to 12th grade, and then I worked at St. Bonaventure University in residence life, campus ministry, a lot of work with liturgy. And then the second half of my life was more administration. So working for the missions and serving as a guardian and a vicar in a number of communities, and now as the archivist. Each ministry was rewarding and challenging in its own way, but I think for me the best part of what I have always done has been the friars and the people that I've lived and worked with, that I've ministered with. I've been lucky enough to have the opportunity to have lived with friars and sisters and lay people from all over the world, and that to me has been very enriching. And I think that that's something that the Franciscan family provides. It's almost a natural provision that we have the opportunity to serve in so many places and with so many people.
Last summer, I was assigned to go to Guatemala for 2 months and to learn Spanish. And at first, I was a little bit hesitant about going because I had some fluency in Spanish, but to go to a foreign country where I have limited fluency and to be living with a family who I didn't know, to be going to a school where I knew nobody, it was a little bit terrifying. But going down there and experiencing life in a new culture, experiencing church in a new culture, was an incredible experience. I made friends with people in Guatemala. I made friends with people from around the world. And I think what was particularly striking, for me at least, was in telling people about my life and the fact that I'm a Franciscan friar, and getting feedback from them saying, but you seem so normal. I think tends to be this idea that, it's a little crazy, and it is a little bit crazy to give up the opportunity to make a lot of money, to, have a wife, and it's not what society says is the normal thing to do. But what they did mention was, you just seem to listen so well. You seem to understand the problems that we're going through. they felt like they could open up to me. And to me, that was a huge gift because it allowed me sort of a lens into their life and offered me an opportunity to help them with some issues that they've maybe been facing and just haven't had anybody to talk to about.
When we think about the vocational process, the discernment process, people often look at it as what you have to give up. If I become a friar, that means I can't get married and I can't have kids. And for me, those were things that were really important to me. And so it was a question of, was I strong enough, or was I able to give these things up to do this other thing? And it wasn't until I met a man who was married, and he said he was very happily married, he wouldn't want it any other way. But he said there isn't a day that goes by that he thinks, what it'd be like to be a friar, that maybe he missed out on something. And it was at that point I realized that if I get married, I'd also be giving something up. I couldn't be a friar. I realized they were both incredible vocations, and they were both great ways to live out a call to discipleship. And that by getting married, there were also things I couldn't do. As being a friar, there were things I did get to do. That right now, I wake up every morning, and I have to only worry about how I'm going to love God's people for Him. I don't have to worry about a mortgage, or I don't have to worry about dependence. I'm just free to love in the best way that God has given me. And in that way, the vows are not binding, they're so freeing.
I believe that everything we do, everything we are, as Christians, as believers, as Franciscans, flows from that relationship with God, a relationship that never ends. From the time I entered the seminary, that time Calico, New York, the minor seminary they called it, I was 17, I never looked back. I've always felt this is where I should be, you know. It's not that another kind of vocation would not be attractive and all, but I don't think there's any earth-shaking kind of call. I think it's an abiding realization that you are where you ought to be. At least that's the way I feel. Have a listening heart, because God does speak to us in so many ways, but we have to be attentive to His voice and to His call, and that is principally in prayer.
We live together in prayer, and that's what makes the difference. What we do doesn't really matter, because by virtue of baptism, all Christians are invited to do ministry, and we must do ministry. But by virtue of our religious profession, we are men of prayer and community, and that's what makes us who we are.
So one of the important dynamics, I think, for anyone in discernment is really to look at that question. Is God calling you to be a Franciscan friar? And as you're asking that question, you may also want to think, is God calling someone else through you? Do you know someone who might be able to embrace the way of fraternity as we do and want to serve the people of God?